Oh yeah, Norman
Have
can
you
tell
tried
you
to?
how he taught me how to drive a tractor.
Yeah, let's do that
I
one.
was 8 years old.
Well, let me start with me driving a tractor.
Well, I actually have a photograph of me driving the tractor with a combine, a 6 foot wide combine, and I was probably about 3. Okay, and so
But it wasn't
I have
moving.
evidence, visual evidence. Now, what Norman's going to tell you is based on a memory of what may have happened back years ago.
There was nothing moving it. um, we had a garden south of the house.
A big garden.
Yeah, and it had a row or rows or just bunches of raspberry plants down from the north end to the south end, and
And about how far was it from the north end to the south end?
I don't know.
Hundreds of feet.
Yeah, 300-400 feet maybe. But anyway, they would like make summer follow out of it. So half of it would be planted one year, and the other half was just kept black. You know, worked it, and
But the garden was almost square. It was a little bit longer than it was wide, probably. But
Yeah,
it was
pretty
it
much
was
square.
several hundred feet
yeah,
wide
pretty
as
much
well.
square. And
And they used the tractor to work it a lot of times.
yeah, originally it
And
was
then
the
you
horses.
But then you still had to hoe.
But the horses, they got rid of the horses somewhere around 1948 or 45. Uh, Probably around 45. They didn't have a,
Not all the horses. We saw Dick and Betty.
well, not then. We got Dick and Betty later. But we had one horse was called Fritz, and that was the saddle horse. And anyway, Dad and Herman, I think, had gone in together on a tractor, but in any event, they both were on a waiting list during the war to get a
World
tractor.
War II, you
Yeah.
couldn't just go buy anything. You had to get on a waiting list.
Yeah, and you had to have some
And that's
sort of
even
a
for
form.
used. That was for
Yeah.
used equipment.
You had to have a government approval to buy it, and but they had the waiting list, and finally it came, and I don't know exactly the order, but anyway, Dad told Uncle Herman he could have that tractor, you know, the new one, and he bought this used one, which was an F-30 International. There was no trim on it, no tin, and
No paint by the time I
yeah,
came along.
Yeah, and I never.
And you started it with a crank.
And I wasn't allowed to start it because
It
it
will kick
kicked.
backwards and take your thumb off.
or whatever.
You learn, don't put your hand like that around the crank. You put your hand like this, so when it kicks back, it doesn't take your thumb.
But anyway, I never did. I drove it some, but I never did start it. And it was used, you know, pretty extensive. And then
Well, Dad had a John Deere, a D John Deere.
I don't remember
At some
the
point,
D.
well, he had it, and it was out by the chicken house because he was working it in the field, and the chassis broke in half and went down like that, and so that was the end of it. And I think that's why he was not crazy about buying another John Deere. And Norman thinks he should have bought a John Deere when we were kids, but he didn't.
He didn't. He did finally, but then he didn't buy a very good one. But anyway, with the new tractor, they sold the horses. And this was probably about 46 or something. I was about 4 years old. I don't remember very much about the horses except that they were so cruel to them, putting them in the truck. They were using electric prods, and you know, I was feeling sorry for these horses because they were, you know, kind of pets, and and they were all broke. You could ride, but the only time they got ridden was to or from the field. You know, Dad would ride it, and so when they got rid of the horses. They bought a 1948 Ford 8N tractor. And, you know, my dad and mother both, mother was more, controlling maybe than my dad, but she would, whatever my dad wanted me to do, she didn't complain about, but she maybe the younger kids. But anyway, the tractor became like what you'd do with a four-wheeler or something. It was used to get the cows, and the main field work that was done with it was pull a planter, a two-row planter that we used for corn, and that was used for corn fodder, which we didn't have a silage chopper, so we just, cut it with the mower and raked it up and stacked it and then fed it to the cows.
Now, we did plant a bunch of corn for personal use in the garden.
Yeah. Well, we planted a lot of things with it in the garden.
Right.
And, that was, the Ford tractor could pull that. The Ford tractor didn't have much power.
Well,
but
it had a little plow, though.
Hey, got a plow and a bucket, scoop bucket, the 3-point hitch at the back. And we used that, either Lila or I would drive the tractor, and when Vernon got old enough, he and Lila would be in the scoop, and I'd be driving most of the time, but Lila would drive some.
School.
Yeah, go to school and back. That was 4 miles.
Yeah, and on the road, but the road wasn't a very heavily trafficked.
Yeah, it was all dirt road.
And so Lila and I, when it was cold weather, would cover up with a quilt. But I got to tell a story about Dad and his first tractor. First tractor, he was cultivating corn, and he was used to using horses. And so he was looking back at the cultivator, and he looked forward, and there was the barbed wire fence right there. And all he could think of was, whoa, whoa, and pulling back on the steering wheel. And he went right down the barbed wire fence, just boom, 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 knocking down posts. He finally got the thing stopped, and he spent the rest of the day fixing fence. So he did have a little patience with us if we messed up. I messed up one time years later. We moved to North Dakota, and everything was different down there. We had different crops, sugar beets, and that's what I was doing, was spreading commercial fertilizer on the sugar beets. And so I had the truck out there in the field, and I was using Lloyd Followell, who had rented our place, and then he and Dad farmed together for a while, and then he and his wife moved out to Seattle, Washington to build airplanes. Boeing. Anyway, so he left 2 tractors. One was an A John Deere, the other was a B John Deere, and the B was a lot smaller. And so I was driving the B John Deere to pull this about 8-foot wide fertilizer spreader. And so I'm looking back, and I was used to using a foot clutch on a tractor. Well, those John Deeres had a hand clutch on the right side. And so I look up, and man, there's the truck. And I'm about to hit the truck. And, I'm hitting that left brake, and it didn't do me any good to stop. And I finally just turned the tractor, and it was the rear end of the truck that I was headed toward. I turned the tractor so the front end of the tractor missed the truck, and the rear wheel on the right side went right underneath the box of the truck and just stalled that tractor out because it didn't have any power. B John Deere wasn't worth much anything. As Aunt Blanche Keller said to Herman before they got married, his vehicle didn't have enough power to pull a setting hen off the nest. That's about the way that B John Deere was.